Good afternoon. This is Colonel Dave Trybula coming to you from headquarters, White Sands Missile Range, on Friday, 24 April 2020, with our COVID-19 updates. To the numbers, New Mexico is reporting 2,521 positive cases, including 651 in the county surrounding Albuquerque, 94 in Santa Fe, 39 in Socorro, 94 in Doña Ana, and 4 in Otero. Both numbers for Santa Fe and Otero are less than yesterday, and so probably reassigned where those cases actually came from. El Paso is reporting 674 cases, and Juarez is reporting 188 cases. New Mexico governor is currently holding a press conference to talk about COVID-19 updates and also what the state is doing for those that are unemployed. El Paso today put out additional guidelines in conjunction with policies regarding Texas's policy for reopening businesses up. Included in those guidelines is a requirement for anyone in El Paso over the age of 2 to wear a facial covering that covers their nose and their mouth when outside of their residence. And so I say that so that you take a look at what those rules are and that you're following them where you reside, and make sure that you're tracking that for where you're going. We had 2 questions today. The first question is, are military personnel and dependents prohibited from traveling to Las Cruces and El Paso? So what I'm going to do is take this in a couple of steps. First of all, the WSMR policy has defined the local area as 100-mile circle around White Sands Missile Range, where you work on White Sands Missile Range, and where your residence is. And if that 100 miles includes Las Cruces and El Paso, then you are, under the WSMR policy, not precluded from going to Las Cruces or El Paso for things that are in compliance with what the state and local officials for those areas allow folks to be there for. And so for New Mexico, it is, which has not started to reopen, it is for essential services only. And so double check and make sure that's what you're going out for if that's the case. Now, each military person who resides or works on White Sands is a member of a particular unit or organization. And those units and organizations can have more restrictive policies than what I just provided. And so you need to check with your chain of command and make sure that you're following what your unit has provided in terms of directions and orders, in addition to what White Sands Missile Range policy is. If you think there is a conflict, let us know. Conflict doesn't mean one is more restrictive. Conflict means you can't do both. And so, again, if there is, we want to make sure we address it and move forward and make sure that we're taking care of everyone and enabling them to be the first line of defense for ourselves. The second question is, are family members allowed to visit those who live in privatized housing? So anyone who's coming onto the installation needs to be sponsored if they don't have direct access to the installation. And so we suspended sponsorships with the provision that you can apply for an exception to policy. And that is done through your chain of command. And so you need to push that through the chain of command, and those come to me for decision. If you are not part of an organization on the installation, then the garrison commander is your chain of command, and you can ask the garrison commander and push the request for an exception to come up. Now, all of those exceptions that come up are based on the premise that to come on the installation, you need to meet all the standards of entry to the military reservation. And so if you can't meet those, and the ones that get folks turned away most often is if they're having not having a driver's license and they're driving a motor vehicle, or having an outstanding warrant gets you processed at the gate because you get the ID check as you come on. But anything that would prohibit you from coming on a military reservation is a separate question than just a regular exception to policy for sponsorship. Additionally, the individual is going to need to be able to pass all the screening questions we ask anybody entering the reservation. And so I want to make sure folks are thinking of that when they're thinking about what is it that we're trying to do, and is that a reason to actually ask for an exception to policy and make sure that the merits of why you want an exception to policy are included in that. I am approving exceptions to policy, so this is not there aren't, but they're done on a case-by-case basis. So those were today's questions. I want to go to something where I think there's some confusion right now, and that's when to wear a mask. And there is a requirement on White Sands Missile Range that if you are not going to be able to maintain social distancing, that you wear a mask. And specifically, to enter and while in the Coyote Cafe, any of our AAFES establishments, including the gas station, the commissary, and the post office, because there is no way to maintain social distancing in those facilities. And so it's required for entry and for the entire time that you are in those facilities. If you're outside and you're walking, is it mandatory or doing anything else on? It is not mandatory. But if you're more comfortable, or you think other people are going to be more comfortable by you wearing a mask or a cloth face covering, please do so. And I would say that is optional. You should have a mask available so that if you find yourself in a situation where you're not going to be able to social distance, that you're able to actually put the cloth facial covering on. And again, this is to protect other people from anything you may have, which is why we're mandating it across the installation. Today's shout outs is to our parents, and really want to say thank you for all the efforts you have done, both the challenges of homeschooling, especially for those not used to homeschooling and changing to that new normal, but also for the improved efforts at actually making sure that our entire family units are practicing good personal hygiene and social distancing, and really being the first line of defense, and making sure that, therefore, we're taking care of our entire workforce and community. Thank you. We'll be back with you tomorrow and through the weekend.